Oh, today we're talking with Michael Hennessy of St. Simons Island, Simons Island, Georgia. The interviewer is Michael McGregor with the Grand Valley State University's Veterans Oral History Project. To begin, Mike, where and when were you born?
I was born January 6, 1949 in Savannah, Georgia, and lived there until 1988 when I moved to St. Simons. My parents, my father was a World War II veteran. He served in the artillery. He was a second lieutenant when it was the Airborne Artillery. He was a second lieutenant that jumped on Corregidor in the Philippines, and also did a landing crafts on Negros. He was an FO. And after the war, he came out, went to business school in Chicago, joined the Georgia Army National Guard, became a battery commander in the early 50s, ended up staying in the reserves and retiring from there in about 1973 as a full colonel in 06. My mother was a native Savannian. She was a host, well, she was a registered nurse, but she didn't work the whole time she was raising us. And by us, I mean myself and my younger brother. I'm the oldest of three. I had a younger brother, Terrence, who was 2 years younger. He's since passed away. And I have a sister, Mary, who is 3 years younger. And that was the Hennessy family. We grew up in Savannah in the 1950s. It was still pretty much a small town. There were maybe 100,000 people in the county at that point. So it was a good time. Being Catholic, I went through Catholic grammar school associated with the parish, and also when I got to high school, I went to Benedictine Military School, which is a boys' Catholic day school in Savannah. My dad had gone there in the 30s. I went there, and just as a note, my sons went there in the 90s. I graduated from high school in 1967. While I was in high school, in a military school, it was compulsory ROTC. I was in the ROTC for 4 years. Commanded the drill team my junior year, and I was the cadet colonel and commanded the cadet brigade my senior year. So I was familiar with the military. I got out, went to the University of Georgia for a short period of time, and when the money ran out, I came back and lived at home and went to the Armstrong State College. In the end of 1968, beginning of 1969, I was getting dissatisfied with school. I'd been in school for 14 years. And I didn't want to do that anymore. Of course, at that time, there was no lottery. If you didn't go to school and keep your student deferment, they drafted you. So, being the young man that I was, I enlisted and went on active duty as soon as my sophomore year in college. I went to basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, went to AIT, Airborne AIT at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and then went to OCS at Fort Benning.
AIT in infantry.
In infantry, Airborne Infantry.
Okay.
Then I went to OCS at Fort Benning, aka Benning School for Boys. I spent 22 out of the 24 weeks of OCS there. I made it past the point where they were going to commission me. You know, they couldn't kick me out because I'd dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's. And then I got to thinking about going to Vietnam as a second lieutenant, and I had, I guess, what you'd call a crisis of confidence. I decided I didn't want to go over. I didn't know how I was going to react in combat, and I sure didn't want to find out with 25 to 30 men depending on me. I'd much rather find out if I could function in a combat situation with only me depending on me. So I told them, no, I don't want to be commissioned. And the Army, in its benevolent wisdom, said, okay, you are qualified as an 11 Bravo 10 light weapons infantryman. Next stop, Vietnam. I came home on leave for 30 days before, and then went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and flew out on the 15th of May, 1970. Got over to Vietnam, came in through Cam Ranh Bay, processed in, got assigned to the 101st, and processed through that, went to CERTS, which is a division school. It's Screaming Eagle Replacement Training Center, or training school, and ended up being assigned to Delta Company, 1st of the 506th Infantry, at Camp Evans, Vietnam. Camp Evans is, or was, 35 miles north of Hue, or approximately. I'm not real sure about the distance, but I knew we were north of the city of Hue. I joined the company in the rear on about the 29th of May. And wait a minute, I think I said I went in country on 15 April. It was 15 May I got in country. It took me about 2 weeks to get to. So after I got there and they got us squared away, there were several others, including Lieutenant John Smith, who became my platoon leader, that came in with me. And we were flown out to Fire Support Base Catherine, and that's where we actually met the company. And I was assigned to 2nd Platoon, 2nd Squad. Life on Catherine was not that bad. It was boring, but it was, you had a place to sleep, you got at least one hot meal a day, and pretty much you sat around and waited to get hit, and we didn't. We were there, and I lose track of time. Exactly how long we were on Catherine, I don't remember. A couple of weeks, I think. And we got to know each other. You know, I got to know the other people in the platoon. They got to know me. We left there, and we went to Ripcord, as a matter of fact. And this was June. Again, we had a fairly benign stay on Ripcord. There wasn't a lot going on. We knew the enemy was outside the wire, but they weren't attacking us, and you know, every once in a while the artillery would go off and fire a couple of fire missions, but there was nothing for the infantry to do. We left there and ended up on Firebase Bastogne, down in the southern part of the 101st AO. And I ran into some guys I'd gone through AIT with. They were short-timers. They were coming home. I was envious. So,
yeah, after a half year in OCS, they had a half year head start on you.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we were down near Bastogne. We came in there, but we immediately went to the field from there and did patrolling around the fire base. We left there and we got on the helicopters. They were going to take us back out to Ripcord AO. Well, they couldn't get there. The weather was too bad. So instead they took us back to Camp Evans, and we had a one-night stand down at the company area. And looking back on it, it was almost as if everybody knew something was coming, because we had a hell of a party that night. First sergeant found steaks and we cooked them on the grill. There was an awful lot of beer consumed that night. The next day when we did fly out of Evans to our landing in near Ripcord. Majority of the company was hung over, I think. I know I was. But we went in, and this would be on the 18th, I think, of July. We flew into a hilltop. I still have not found, I don't know which hill we went in on. I mean, heck, I was a Speedy 4 in the 2nd Squad of the 2nd Platoon. They didn't tell me things like that. They got on the ground, they said, you go over there and dig your hole. And I did. We were there, that's the afternoon that the Chinook crashed on Ripcord. We saw it. We could see Ripcord off in the distance, and we saw the thing crash, which didn't sound well for us. So
the Chinook crashed, and that took out the that 105 battery.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it landed right on top of the ammo dump, right next to the 105 battery, and that just pretty much ended that affair. The next day, the 19th, I'm getting my days, yeah, the 19th, I was sent on a reconnaissance with Gib Rossiter and 2 or 3 others. Gib was the platoon sergeant. He was an E6, and we were on top of a hill. The only thing I remember about this is we came down. We walked down into a chasm or something, you know, like a valley, and it was an awful long way down, and I had my radio on my back. We got down there and found a cave with dead NVA in it, like a dozen of them. They were not fresh deads. They had been dead for a while. So we searched the bodies, and I think Gib got a couple of pieces of paper that were in Vietnamese, so we took them back to the company. I do remember going back, because all the way down was now all the way up. And I had that prick 25 on my back. And it was one heck of a climb. We got back up, spent the night. Of course, never having been in combat, the new guys like me are all jumpy. We're, you know, every time you hear a sound, you think it's the NVA getting ready to overrun you. They didn't. The next day, the 20th, we got word we were being moved. And, okay, I don't know whether you can see this or not. If this is Firebase Ripcord.
Okay.
We were over here. They took us from here. We flew around an arc around Ripcord, and they put us in over here. And that was a hot LZ. Going into a hot LZ is an interesting aspect, as you well know. I'm flying, you know, riding on with the door open, sitting on the floor of the helicopter, and I look out, and it looks like Christmas tree lights coming up out of the ground, out of the jungle. Then I realized those are people shooting at me. We landed on the LZ. We didn't get hit. One of our birds got hit and made it back to Evans. And when they got to Evans, the guys unloaded, and Rossiter gets off, got his rucksack on, and the door gunner says, "Hey Sarge, I think this belongs to you," and flips him his gas mask, which had been attached to his rucksack. It had been shot off. And so he got that, they all loaded back up on another bird, and they came back out to join us. Thing I remember about the landing, we went in, and like I said, it was hot. We were getting small arms fire. On the side of the LZ, there were a bunch of rather large trees, and then a tree line. This is where I guess they had cleared the trees to make the LZ. Well, you get off of the bird and you don't want to stay out there. They're screaming at you to get to the wood line. The trees, down trees, are in the way. And if y'all remember the O.J. Simpson commercial back before he became a bad guy, where he was running through airports and jumping over luggage, well, I sprinted as well as I could with all my equipment off of that LZ, and I was taking those trees as if they were hurdles, like I was running track, and I felt like OJ, you know, get to the wood line. So we did. Once we did that, they split us up. 3rd Platoon went to the left of the LZ, as the way we came in being, you know, that they went to our left. We, the 1st and 2nd Platoon, went to the right along with the company headquarters. We set up, made a defensive position right off the LZ and broke for lunch. Well, there was a trail coming in using the way we went into the LZ as 12 o'clock this way. There was a trail coming in from over here about 3 o'clock. Standard procedure, we put a machine gunner on the trail. I was sitting somewhere in between that and where we came in, so I was at like 1, 2 o'clock, something like that. And I'm sitting there chowing down on my tasty sea rations. All of a sudden, the gunner jumps up, screams, "Chew hoy, motherfucker," and just starts firing. There were 3 North Vietnamese coming down the trail, and they thought they were in Hanoi. They were just jabbering and talking. They had no idea we were there. Well, they found out, and that was the end of them. A little bit later that afternoon, we moved up the trail past the dead Vietnamese, 500 meters or so, to the top of a hill where these 3 had been on a work detail, because we could see where they were digging trenches up there. It looked like a mortar pit. So we set up an NDP, night defensive position, there. And then about dark, Lieutenant Smith came around and said, "Rossiter, take 2 men and go on LP, listening post." Well, you need a radio. So guess who got to be the radio? We went out another 50, 100 meters away from the NDP and set up an LP. Spent the entire night listening to the North Vietnamese moving all around us. We could hear them talking, hear them moving, but we didn't know how many there were. It sounded like a lot, and we weren't an ambush, we were an LP.
Right.
So we just sat there and turned the squelch on the radio all the way down so that when we got sit reps, they wouldn't alert anybody that that we were there. Next morning, first light, sometime around 6 a.m., I think. We pull back in, and I go to my rucksack. I'm sitting down, eating breakfast by my rucksack, leaning back on the rucksack, and I hear mortar rounds falling about 100 meters down away from us. And I thought to myself, "You stupid son of a bitch. You missed us." Well, the next thing I know, there are a number of gas rounds coming down right on top of our position.
CS gas?
CS gas. And they did that in 30 seconds. Everybody jumps up and runs to find their gas mask, because the American GI doesn't remember where they put his gas mask. But all of a sudden they need them, so they're up running around. 30 seconds after they hit, we had a whole slew of HE rounds, mortar rounds, come in, and everybody was up running around. We had a couple of people killed at that time. then like I said, I was laying on my ruck, so all I did was I reached around and grabbed my gas mask. I was lucky. And I went prone with my rifle looking out, trying to see, you know, where are they? Only thing I got happened to me was a piece of shrapnel in my butt. That was a very small piece of shrapnel because I reached around and I could feel it. I could feel it sticking out of my pants. So I reached around and grabbed it and pulled it out and burned my fingers. Something I forgot to, let's go back to the night of the 20th.
Okay.
About sundown, 3rd Platoon, the one that had gone off the other side of the LZ, ran into some very bad stuff. They lost 3 men, boom, 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 right like that. Apparently they walked in on an NVA base camp of some kind.
Would this be that bunker complex that they were?
Well, yeah, it may be.
Okay.
Again, I was mainly concerned with me and those around me, but I remember hearing chatter on the radio.
Okay.
And I do know that at some point, as it was getting dark, the company commander, Captain Workman, also known as Ranger as his call sign, pulled 3rd Platoon back and brought them into our perimeter. So we were all there when the mortar rounds hit. The next morning after the mortar rounds, it became apparent there were NVA all around us, infantry. And they were fixing to sweep us. So the one place they weren't was the trail back to the LZ. So we had put mechanical ambushes on there. And one of the guys who had set the ambushes was not wounded or killed. So he went down and disarmed the ambushes, and we went back down the trail, set up again on the LZ, or on the edge of the LZ. Now, if you look at, all right, this is the LZ, we came in this way, we came back this way. If you change your orientation so that this is now 12 o'clock. When we set up, 2nd Platoon had from about 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the perimeter. I was between 8 and 9 because I was put in a hole. They told me to, Hennessy, leave your radio with the lieutenant who was wounded, and you get down there in that hole. Well, down there in that hole was with the Kit Carson Scout. That was not a popular place to be. The NVA, as soon as they spotted him, figured that, you know, he's a traitor. We're going to get that son of a bitch. So it made our life very interesting over the next hour or so. They tried to run us off the end of the, you know, they tried to run through our NDP, coming back down the trail and coming up from the sides of the hill. They didn't come across the LZ, but we were getting mortared and there were infantry maneuvering against us. Basically, once we got there and got dug in, we kicked ass and took names. At some point during, and I don't have a good chronology of time.
Yeah, just let it flow.
Yeah, but at some point that morning, one of the NVA decided he was going to get that Kit Carson Scout. Since I was standing in the foxhole next to him, that meant he was going to get me too. I look up, I'm, you know, looking back and forth across my sector of fire, and I see an American baseball grenade coming at me. I read the thing. You know, the nomenclature in the yellow paint on that green grenade, I swear I read it. I could, at one point, could tell you the lot number. Luckily, it went over behind us, and we were on a steep slope, so that meant it was above us, and the only thing you could see of either one of us was our helmet. The hole was that deep. We had dug in. So it went off behind us. and no harm, no foul. Scared the hell out of the people in the CP. But we start firing up the area. Well, we conserve ammo, we stopped. I knew what tree he was behind though. And all of a sudden, here comes a satchel charge. It's short and starts sliding up the slope towards us. And the only thing that kept it out of the out of our foxhole was the dirt we had thrown up in front of the foxhole when we dug it. And you know, it's a case of that thing's going to come in, and you close your eyes and drop your head, and it went off like from there to here. But again, my helmet was in the way, thank God. I was deaf, but my helmet was in the way. So I figured that guy, he's one long round, one short round, he ain't getting a third chance. And so I started feeding magazines into my weapon and firing on full automatic at the tree I knew he was behind. Now, it was big. There was no way I was going to hit him through the tree. You know, I was just putting rounds into it. But it focused my attention, and the next time I saw an arm come out with a grenade from behind that tree, I sawed his arm off with my M16. And his arm and the grenade fell onto the ground and then went off. Now, I don't know whether he was WIA or KIA. I do know I ruined his week. At some point after that, we're still in the morning of the 21st, we started getting medevac birds in and resupply birds because we were burning ammo and water. So they were coming in one behind the other. Medevac would come in, resupply would be the next bird in, kicking that, and they wouldn't even land. They just kicked the boxes off the sides of the helicopter and then just keep going. One of the NCOs in our platoon, I think it was Paul Mueller, came up and said, okay, you, and you, come with me. So he's a sergeant, I'm a Speedy 4. Get out of the foxhole, because we were no longer in active contact. And he says, they're putting ammo out there on the LZ. And every now and again there was a mortar round dropping, you know, harassing fire. He said, go get it. And I looked at him and I said, Sergeant, it works better when you lead from the front. As soon as you head out there, I will. And he did. He still remembers that. I talked to him in 1993, and he brought that up.
Okay.
So we got the ammo, dragged it back off, and started breaking it down. Again, I am estimating time here, around 11 o'clock. It's been quiet for an hour or so. We've been calling artillery rounds in. We're taking casualties every now and again from mortar rounds, but that's about it. But I, of all things, have got to go take a crap. Well, I can't go outside the perimeter to take a crap. So I came back out, found an area just away from where the people in the CP would not see me and get upset. Dug me a little hole, and I'm squatting there doing God's business. And all of a sudden, here comes the damn mortar rounds. They hit us again. At the risk of being crude, I was scared shitless. I did manage to finish what I was doing, clean myself up a little bit, get my pants up, and get back in the hole. Of course, then the people, after that stopped, the people in the CP started screaming about the fact that I didn't cover up the hole. And that's,
didn't follow proper field sanitation procedures.
yes. So everything was kind of, we were there. We didn't know what we were going to do. About 11:30 or so, we got one of our birds, a medevac bird, shot down on the LZ. But it was wide enough, it was a two-ship LZ. Now, I think at some point, Ranger had sent some troops across the LZ to secure the other side, but I can't swear to that. I know that at that point that we only had two officers. We had Ranger and we had my LT, John Smith. The 1st and 3rd platoon lieutenants had been wounded, either on the night of the 20th or in the morning of the 21st, and they had been medevaced. We had, so it was, we're wondering, are they going to pull us out of here? Gee, I sure hope they do. I don't want to spend the night here. And about 3 o'clock, the last of the resupply birds, or 2 o'clock or something, after lunch, it's getting to be afternoon now. We are still calling fire missions. We're still getting H&I mortar rounds. And we know the enemy is out there just out of our sight around the perimeter, just down the hill. Somebody announced that's the last supply bird till morning. That's as lonely as I have ever felt in my life, because I knew for a certainty that if we got left there to spend the night, I would not see the morning of the 22nd. We would be overrun that night, because I don't know where this came from, but they estimated, the rumor going around was that they had dropped our 88-man company in on top of a battalion of NVA coming out of that bunker complex. And we were on their home court. So I'm sitting there thinking, Lord, I'm too young to die. Well, to pass the time, the company commander sent word down to Lieutenant Smith, who sent word to Tony Cox, who was an E5, one of the shake and bakes. Send a patrol back up to the last night's NDP. Pick up all the weapons you can carry and bring them back. Pick up any bodies you can carry and bring them back. Well, between the wounded that were up there and the killed, the wounded that we had medevac from up, brought back with us and medevac, that place was overrun with weapons. So first trip, we didn't get anything but weapons. Second trip, we got, I don't know that we ever got a body, but we got more weapons. And so we're back in there, and I'm back in the position. Somebody else has replaced me in the hole with the Kit Carson's goat. I'm up at the CP, the company CP. I mean the platoon CP.
Now you're back on the radio at this time, or?
Well, I had the radio with me. That's why I went on the patrol. I had the radio.
Okay, but after the satchel charge, how long did you lose your hearing?
5-10 minutes,
okay.
Something like that.
But all you had was just heavy ringing in the ears?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could still.
Yeah.
You could still communicate.
Yeah, and I was sent, I was the radio man on the patrols going back. Well, we got back, everybody's sitting around watching the bushes. I imagine there was a lot of soul searching going on. I know that my soul got searched thoroughly. And we get a message, get Cox and his crew to go back up there. Oh, Jesus, not again. And then we get the word that Delta Company, 2nd of the 506, has landed on an LZ, 2 clicks away, up the hill, past our NDP. They're coming to us to help secure our position. So we went up there to do a meet and greet with them, so they didn't get fired up when they came to our position. And we led them back down and into our defensive position. So they were all there. So now we got I think there were about 20 of us left at the time. In
20 of Delta Company.
Delta, first of the
First,
06.
yeah.
And then we've got, they had a, you know, they were 80 or 90 men. We thought, wow, we got a lot of people in here now, it's getting crowded. They went across and secured the other side of the LZ, mainly. And then about 3:30 or so, message comes down, get ready to, we're being evacuated. Both companies, get ready to go. And like I said earlier, I was a squad radio operator. I was one, by this time in the day, I was one of 2 working radios left in the company. So Ranger sent Lieutenant Smith and myself to the other side of the LZ to wait for the birds, and he told Smitty to call initial PZ. You're going out on the first bird. And Smitty looks at me and says, when we lift off, you call battalion. Yes, sir. Smitty was wounded. He was walking wounded. And we loaded up the first bird in on short final, and we get, again, got all my gear, my radio, my rifle, about 4 other weapons, you know, a couple of thumpers, another M16. Didn't have a 60 that day, but I had a little bit of everything else. And Lieutenant Smith on one arm. They land, we go up there, dive in, and it was a case of you get there and dive in because they're not going to stay. It's a case of like that. Mm-hmm. And we took off. I called battalion. Well, actually, I was calling Ripcord because we were up con to the 2nd of the 506th. I called Ripcord. I got somebody in the talk and just said initial PZ. And at, I think, for some reason, I think it was like 1602. I don't remember. You know, I don't hold me to that, but that's the memory I have. Well, another bird came in behind us, and we're going to Evans, and everybody on the birds are just happier than hell. And we land at the right outside our company where the pad was at Evans, and it's the you know, we're gathered around waiting on the rest of the company. Well, our bird came in, the next bird came in, then there are no more birds. And we didn't know what was going on. We knew something bad had happened, but there are like 8 of us or so on those 2 birds total. And we're looking at each other like, oh hell, what happened? Later that night, the rest of the company came in. They explained to us what had happened and that Captain Workman had been killed. Apparently the 3rd bird was his bird out. He had 22 days left in Vietnam and he had a wedding to go to, his. Mm-hmm. Bird was coming in on short final and he went running towards it along with everybody else. Well, he was in the lead. They dropped mortar rounds in front of the bird, and it started doing this. Well, one of the rotor blades caught him. I don't know whether, I'd heard initially, the initial story was he was decapitated. I've since heard, no, he was just cut in half, like through the waist or something. Either way, he was dead. There were few people left from my company there were in shock because we all thought the world of Captain Workman. And
yeah, wasn't it that he didn't even have to be there, but he didn't.
Well, yeah,
he didn't
his
have
replacement
confidence in his replacement.
Yeah, his replacement was there, was in company. But he said, the night we all got drunk, he said, we're fixing, I got a feeling we're going into some deep shit. And I don't trust the new guy to take y'all out there. And if y'all are going, I'm going.
Okay.
Because he was supposed to start out processing instead of going out with us. And that was literally his bird home that killed him. Captain Rollison, the commander of Delta 2nd of the 506, got on the horn to Ripcord, explained the situation, and was told to go back to where he started and get everybody out from that other LZ. Oh, one thing. The bird that went down that killed the captain and closed the LZ. Now we got 2 birds down. There's no way you can land another bird. One of the door gunners, story has it, one of the door gunners got flipped out and the chopper ended up, the skid came down across his legs. So they're mortaring and he's trapped out there under this helicopter. James Fowler from East St. Louis, Illinois, ran out there, and I don't know to this day how Jim did it, but he grabbed a hold of the skid and lifted it off that guy while somebody else pulled him out. He got the Silver Star for that. I think it was well deserved.
Sure.
The next morning when we had muster formation or morning formation, there were 15 of us in the company. No officers. We had an E7 who was supply sergeant or something, acting as the commander of the company. That was the 23rd, or 22nd, I'm sorry, of July. It was August before we got filled back up and sent back to the field. We were pretty well shot. The rest of my time in Vietnam was...
Now, at this point, how long did it take you to build back up to effective field strength, your unit? I mean, you're basically...
all right, we were down to 15 men on the 22nd when we had the formation. We went back to the woods with a more or less full complement of troops before the 15th of August. I mean, I'm thinking it was closer to August 1st, but again, it's been 43 years.
So you re-equipped and rearmed?
Re-equipped and got replacements, and some of the guys that came in became, since I had so much time left, became some of my best friends in Vietnam.
Okay.
I also made the decision that I wasn't going to carry a radio anymore. And all of a sudden I had enough seniority in the company that I could do that. Give it to one of the FNGs. And so they asked me what I wanted to do. I said, well, I'll do something less dangerous and carry a radio. Y'all teach me how to walk point. And they did. A fellow named Dan O'Connor, his nickname was Roach, was our point man in the 2nd platoon. Well, I started walking slack for him. That's second man in the file. And then after a couple of weeks, we started trading off. Well, by September, O'Connor had moved to a LRP unit. And I was the point man for the 2nd platoon. And I walked point until 2 weeks before I left in April. I trained one of the new guys, Red Lennox, Ronald Red Lennox from Bay City, Michigan, to be my slack. And we started trading off. At some point down the road this is in 71 now, we were patrolling along a river, and he was walking point, I was walking slack. And you know, when you walk slack, you look back and forth because you're responsible for this area here, not what's straight in front of you. I come across like that, and Red's there walking in front of me. I come back, and he's gone. Just And I haven't heard a thing. No gunfire, nothing. So I go, you know, everybody down. I go crawling up. There's Red in a ditch that had been covered with vines 6 feet deep. It was one of the canals that ran into that river. And he's down there looking up like, get me out of here. And, you know, I thought he
Oh, so
died.
it was a natural ditch,
Yes,
not
it was.
not a punji pit or
No,
anything.
no, it was a natural ditch. That was also that day or the
But
next.
you didn't hear him fall through the vines?
No,
or?
he didn't say anything. And, you know, I'm concentrating and I come back across and he's just not there. Scared the hell out of me.
Talk about an oh shit moment.
Yeah, exactly. That was also the time that I got to put my pre-Army training to use, I guess. We had to cross the river. Well, the river was 75 yards wide, and you couldn't walk it. It was too deep in the middle. So the commander, and I don't remember who it was then, started at, anybody got any lifeguard experience? Well, that's what I did after I got out of high school. That was my summer job. I was a qualified American Red Cross water safety instructor, lifeguard, and small craft safety instructor. So, yeah, I do. So I stripped down to took my jacket and all my gear off, and tied a rope around my waist, left my shoes and my pants on, and started swimming across this river. It wasn't a hard swim, but I get half, 3/4 of the way over, and I look. We're right next to where our railroad used to go through there, because there's bridge and, you know,
The pilings or the bridge.
yeah,
But
the concrete, you know, the stone pilings. I look, and up on the one on the other side of the river, there are Vietnamese. And I thought, I'm dead. They can't pull me, you know, I'm a sitting duck out here, and even if the guys back there that got the other end of the rope start pulling me, I'm just like, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Turned out it was Marvin, the Arvin.
oh, okay.
So they were up there just jabbering away, laughing at me. So I got out, I secured that end of the rope, and then everybody else used it to get across. Somebody brought my gear across. I don't remember exactly how we managed to get it over without getting it, you know, everything soaked. But that was another fun day. Then in January, well actually in November, I got to go on a 3-day in-country R&R to China Beach.
Oh, good to know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'd been in the bush since May. I'd been in the bush longer than anybody else left in the company. So, and I started grumbling. Well, First Sergeant got this opportunity, and I'd been bending his ear. And so I get word to go back to the rear. He's got a 3-day in-country for me. So I did. Had a great time at China Beach. Slept on clean sheets. They served beer with breakfast. They had a library that had books in it that you could take out and read. And in addition to that, there was the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a great time. Talked to one of the lifeguards there, and we got to talking, and I said something about being a WSI. He said, "You need to talk to Sergeant so-and-so. He's our NCOIC." I said, "Why?" He said, "We need lifeguards." So I went over and got introduced, and we got to talking, and he was clearly impressed with my qualifications. He said, "We want you to extend for 6 months, and we'll give you a job as a lifeguard here." I said, "Okay. Answer one question before I sign on the dotted line. If I extend for 6 months, and 2 months into that 6 months, everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and the American forces are being overrun, what happens? do I get evacuated with, no, you're an 11 Bravo, you get sent back to the line. And I said, thank you, no thank you. You know, I got a fiance at home, and I've got, they're planning a wedding for May when I get home, so no thank you. We're not going to take that chance.
Okay.
We started getting early outs late in my year there. I quit walking point. I was just too short to be in the field. We were working the lowlands. I heard some noise one night. It could have been animals. It could have been NVA. We didn't see any Viet Cong that I knew of. But I had continuous illumination all night long to keep the lights on so they couldn't sneak up on us.
Exactly.
Brand new lieutenant came to me the next day and he says, Sergeant, because by then I'd been promoted to E5. Sergeant, don't do that anymore. I said, sir, I'm just too short to be in the field. So he said, well, you're not walking point. We'll have somebody else walking point. You go walk drag. So I did, and we were patrolling in the lowlands somewhere outside of Evans, south of Evans. We started taking rifle fire from in front of us. There was a thicket, a hedge, and they were shooting from there. And I'm at the back end of the thing, and I screamed at 2 or 3 of the guys in front of me, let's go, this way. And we took off to the right. We were going to go through another set of hedges and come up and flank them. Well, we get charging, and we get to the hedge, and one of the guys starts to go in, and I scream, don't, and threw a hand grenade in there. We got 3 explosions. Of course, by that time, the bad guys that had been shooting at us decided that they'd bitten off a little more than they could chew, and they took off.
Well, they're just setting you up to flank them and booby trap you coming in too, right? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but that was, we were able to do that, and one of my men kept his legs.
Yeah.
So I got out. They were giving early outs. I came in from the field end of March. I know I was still in the field for St. Patrick's Day because that's a big deal in my family.
Yes.
We were on Rockason, as a matter of fact, that day, and I got sent over to an an OP, where they were having an award ceremony, and I don't remember whether it was the Bronze Star or the basic, I've showed up and I'm still alive, so I get the medal. It was one of them. My mother had sent me a little, like a cocktail pick, there's a toothpick with an Irish flag on it, which I promptly stuck in my helmet, in my sweatband. And we're standing in formation. I look like hell, because I've been in the bush or on Rockason. Mm-hmm. My uniform is filthy. Division Sergeant Major's leading the way, in that party that's giving out the award, the medals. And he gets in front of me and just starts chewing about my uniform is a disgrace, and he looks up and he sees that thing, and I thought the man was going to explode. What in the hell is that in your helmet? So, Sergeant? Sir, that's a St. Patrick's Day Erringo Bra flag. Take it off. I said, no. What do you mean, no? I said, 2 things. George Washington had thought enough of the Irish that he declared March 17th as a day off from training during the Revolutionary War. Secondly, look at your division commander. What's his last name? And he screams out, Hennessy. I said, yeah. Guess what my last name is? And I said, I'm not sure he's related or not, but I'll be glad to talk to him about it. And he stormed off down the way. Division commander came up, gave me my medal, said, "Congratulations, you know, we're proud of you." I didn't say a word. But I got out of that. I ended up processing out. I remember I was at division headquarters Easter 1971 because I ran into a guy I'd gone through certs with who was a postal clerk. I spent the Saturday night leading into Easter sleeping in the division post office on bags of mail. That was after we had a little party. But I left there and I moved on down to Cameron Bay and out processed there. I left Vietnam at 6:15 on the morning of April 15th, 1971. Flew back to Seattle, to McCord Air Force Base, and arrived at 6:10 a.m. April 15th. So I actually got back 5 minutes before I left, which I always thought was cool. Processed through there. Later that afternoon, I was I got a flight home, showed back up in Savannah at like 1 a.m. on the 16th. You know, had my parents and my girlfriend, my fiance, waiting on me. My sister was there, and at Travis Field. And I'd gone to sleep on the plane in Atlanta. It'd been so darn long since I'd had anything to sleep. When I got on the plane in Atlanta, I asked the stewardess to let me sit right in the front of coach, so I'd be the first one off the plane. Well, the plane took off and I promptly went to sleep. Finally, she comes up, somebody's shaking me. "Excuse me, are you going to get off? Are you going to get off? Wake up, you got to get off." I wake up. There is nobody else on the plane at all except me. And that was when you had to go out and you went down stairs and walked across the tarmac. Well, I come out and there's my parents and my girlfriend and several other people who had come out to see me. They're getting frantic because everybody else has gotten off the plane and I'm not there, and that's the plane I told them I'd be on. So that's the story of my time in Vietnam.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your story tremendously. It's a great story. We're almost out of tape. Just one question, then you subsequently went into the National Guard and retired out of the National Guard?
Yes, I enlisted in the Georgia Guard. I got off of active duty. I still had time. So I went, after I got married, I was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division. Alpha Company, 1st to the 2nd Infantry. We used to refer to ourselves as the 1/2 Infantry. And I stayed there until January 1972.
Okay, stop.
Okay, a quick wrap up of some things that we had forgotten to talk about.
Okay.
I carried 2 books in my rucksack the whole time I was in Vietnam. The Norton's Anthology of Poetry and the complete works of William Butler Yeats. I also read a lot, but in Yeats I found the explanation of my time in Vietnam. It was a poem that was written in 1915 called An Irish Airman Meets His Fate, and the first stanza sums up my tour in Vietnam. "I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere among the clouds above. Those I fight, I do not hate. Those I guard, I do not love." That about said it in 4 lines.
Yeah, that was really very pertinent.
After I got back from Vietnam, you asked about incidents.
Yeah, how did you have any untold incidents of people?
The day I got back, basically after my nap on the airplane, I was up for another 48 hours. And I was at my house with my fiance the middle of the first afternoon, and a friend of mine came over, a girl I had known since I was like in the 7th grade. She was always just a friend. She still is. But she came over, and we got to talking, and one of the things she asked me was, how many babies did you kill? And I told her to get her ass up and get out of the house, or I was going to throw her out. A day or so later, we went to the local bar that I went to a lot of college kids did. Jim Collins, he's dead now, the bar is closed. But Jim had a guitar behind the bar, and late at night, if he knew you and knew you could play, he'd pull the guitar out and hand it across the bar. Well, Jim was a character, I guess is the best way to put it. So he gave it to my fiance, and we started. And I got her to start playing Vietnam protest songs. You know, Lyndon Johnson told the nation, don't be afraid of escalation. Mm-hmm. That type stuff. Well, Jim got upset. I want my guitar back. You can't sing Vietnam protest songs in here. I support our troops in Vietnam. I said, if anybody can sing them, I can, because I just spent a year over there. So, after I got married, I went to Fort Riley, Kansas, like I said, and joined the half infantry. Only memorable thing about that was I met a very good friend, my first sergeant, Tom McDonough, and he and his wife Ruth took a shine to my wife and myself. Tom and the McDonoughs and the Hennessys got to be really good friends. We spent Christmas at their house. They spent Thanksgiving at our apartment. We had a great time. Tom arranged for me to get out of the field, as it were, in Kansas, and take a job as a battalion finance NCO. I worked in the Division Finance Center, handling complaints and setting up allotments for people from our battalion. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, no formations, no extra duty, no PT. I enjoyed it. We went on Reforger in October of '72, flew to Germany, the whole division, picked up our equipment. We were over there for 4 weeks. We actually maneuvered a week. The rest of the time we were just sort of moving around South Germany and having a blast. You'd pull into an area, you'd move to where they wanted you to be for that day, get there at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, set up your bivouac area, and then you were free. You could go in the village and go to have some of that good German beer, or have some Wiener Schnitzel or something like that. Come back that night, spend the night, get up the next day and move to another town and do it. It was a lot of fun. I got an early out in January of 72. Yeah, I'm sorry, we were over there in Reforger 71. I got out in January 72, and I got an early out because I had been accepted to go back to school. And I out-processed, and it was January 5th, 1972. I was in Manhattan, Kansas. The movers had already come, so I loaded up the Volkswagen and my wife, and we headed for Savannah. And I decided I was going to drive straight through, because January 6th was my birthday, and I was going to be home for my birthday. So we did. Followed a blizzard across Missouri and Illinois. It kind of let up when we got to Kentucky. We would swap off driving. Mm-hmm. But basically, stopped to go to the bathroom, stopped to eat a meal, swapped drivers, you know, and we got home about noon on January 6th. So that was the end of my military career at that point until October.
Now you went back to school to University of Georgia?
No, I went to Armstrong State College in Savannah. And I found a job. I was working swing shift at American Cyanamid as a lab tech in the quality control lab. So in September, I got to thinking, well, my dad's retired from the National Guard, and he's got a pretty good life. And I've always, now that I've been to Vietnam, I know how I react under fire. I could lead men in combat. So I went out to the local National Guard unit, which was a field artillery unit, a group headquarters, and signed up. Of course, it helped that I was signing up for the unit that was designated the Chatham Artillery. Chatham Artillery started in 1786 and has been around and been active in the Georgia Guard since then, all the time. It still is, by the way. My dad was a member. He was the treasurer of the Chatham Artillery Association.
Okay.
So they had a place for me, so I joined in October 72. In June 73, I went to OCS, state OCS, 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks up during the summer. We went one drill, then 2 weeks, then 12 drills, and then 2 more weeks, and we were commissioned after that. I got my commission in August 1974 as a second lieutenant in the field artillery. I took correspondence courses to qualify. I'm perhaps the only field artilleryman who's never been to Fort Sill.
Never did the basic course there.
I did the basic course by correspondence and learned OJT. I started out as a observer, from group. We'd fly around in helicopters, and we never got to adjust fire that way, but that's what we were supposed to do. Mm-hmm. It meant generally that we were flunkies in the group headquarters, and we were the lowest ranking officer, so anything nobody else wanted to do, we got assigned the detail to organize this. Spent some time there, then I transferred to a firing battery and went in as the FDO, learned FDC procedure and found out I liked it.
What kind of battery? What kind of guns?
155 self-propelled.
So SPs, okay.
Yeah. Spent a couple of years with them, then I moved down to another firing battery. All the firing batteries in Savannah have a designation to one of the historic units. The battery I was in after I left the Chathams was the Savannah Volunteer Guards. It's a little bit younger than the Chathams, but it's also over 200 years old. I left there and went to Charlie Battery, 1st to the 230th, and that was designated the Irish Jasper Greens, and I was coming home because in 1950 and 51, my daddy was the battery commander.
Oh, okay.
And I started out as the FDO and became the executive officer of the Irish Jasper Greens. Stayed there, that takes me up to 1980, and the weight control program was in full force. So I got asked to leave the National Guard because of my weight. I could not make weight standards. So I went back into the reserves, got my commission as a captain. That's what drove me out of the Guard, was I was hard on the deadline for captain. Came back in 85 after I got my weight down and became an FSO, fire support officer for a battalion of armor in the Georgia Guard. Then I took over as the commander of B Battery, 1st to the 230th, in Reedsville, Georgia. And I commanded them for 2 years. We had a good 2 years there. It was a whole bunch of country boys and me. And we did some good things. But after that, I transferred. I kicked around as FSOs for various places. I was the assistant S3 and all like that for the battalion. 89, the weight control came back and reared its ugly head. Actually, no, it wasn't the weight control. I was hard up against the move to major. I had to get my advanced course done. Well, I had changed jobs and I was living in Brunswick, working in Brunswick and living on St. Simons. I was the chief financial officer of a home health agency that was growing by leaps and bounds. And I didn't feel like I could take 6 months away from that to go take the advanced course. And you couldn't take the advanced course by correspondence. You had to go out there. So January 1990, excuse me, I retired, I resigned my commission and enlisted in the Georgia Guard. As an E5, I was in the fire direction control of Alpha Battery, 1st to the 230th, in Brunswick. That's where I was serving when we got mobilized for Desert Storm. We were at summer camp when the invasion of Kuwait happened. And the rumor mill was just running rampant that we weren't even going to get to come home, that they were just going to keep us, because at that time the 230th supported the 48th Infantry Brigade. And the 48th Infantry Brigade had been tagged as the 3rd Brigade of the 24th Infantry Division. Well, as it turns out, 24th Infantry did not want us going to war with them. So we got slipped out of that. They deployed. We're sitting around, politicians going crazy about why they didn't deploy why they didn't federalize the National Guard in Georgia and send us off to war. We wanted to go to war. That was the politicians and the ranking people in the 48th Brigade. Finally, we were mobilized in November 1990, and we were sent initially to Fort Stewart, and then after Christmas we were sent to the National Training Center. And we went through a cycle, and lo and behold, the Army says we weren't combat ready. But they had to say that, because if they had marked us after 6 weeks in the National Training Center as combat ready, the next thing after this war was over with is one of those senators would say, well, you're asking for additional funds to build up another brigade. You can do it on the cheap by using the National Guard and just bringing them in for 6 weeks training at the start of a war. So they were going to, the day we got to the grades for our performance at NTC were written the day we got there. And we designed the tactics that they used when they did invade Kuwait to take it back. We were the ones that would practice these tactics, and they'd videotape them, and they'd look at them, and once they said, okay, yeah, that's the way we want to do it, they'd take that videotape and ship it to units in Iraq or Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And they would look at that and use that as a training aid. We did get orders to go to Iraq. We were supposed to leave Fort Irwin in mid-March, go back to Fort Stewart, pick up gear there, and deploy. Well, we got those orders the middle of February. Then the end of February, the invasion started, and we found out that Saddam was a paper tiger, and the Republican Guard was worse than the Brownie Scouts as far as their abilities. So, of course, they stopped all deployments immediately. So instead of going to Fort Stewart and then to Saudi Arabia and then Iraq, we were sent to Fort Stewart around the 10th of March and started out processing. And we were out of the Army by 15th of April.
And then when did you finally retire from the Guard?
I retired January of '94.
Okay.
I had changed jobs a couple of times. That fine gentleman I worked for that had that I didn't feel like I could
Take 6 months.
take 6 months replaced me while I was gone.
Okay.
I knew that when I came back, and I went to talk to the Labor Department people as part of the out processing, and they said, "Yeah, we'll be glad to take your case. Think you got a good one. We'll take it, do an investigation, and in 2 years we'll recommend that the Justice Department prosecute it." And I said, "And what am I supposed to do to feed my family until then?" "Oh, well, we don't know." I said, "I've got 6 kids. Oldest one's in college, and the second one's fixing to go to college. And I can't afford to be living on welfare." So I made the best deal I could with him, and I went to work other places. I went to work in Kentucky for a home health agency. I didn't transfer, but I drilled with an 8-inch battery in Kentucky for 6 or 7 months. Excuse me. Turn that off, please. This is my lieutenant.
Okay.
Along the way, I made sure they got all my time accounted for, because the National Guard is lousy at keeping time. When I finally did that in January of '94, I retired from the Guard. I had my, what they call a red bordered letter, except by the time I got out in '94 there was no red border on it, but I had the letter saying that I was qualified. I had my 20 good years, and I could retire, so I did. Was a gray, what they call a gray area retiree from '94 to '99. No, wait a minute. I turned 60 in 2009, so until 2009.
Okay, yeah.
I was just hanging out there in limbo. And at that point I started receiving benefits. I get a check every month. I get medical benefits, which are worth even more than a check. Get access to places to go on vacation. Up on Lake Altoona, just outside of Atlanta, there's a Navy recreation camp, cabins. And it also happens to be 5 miles from where my wife grew up.
Oh, great.
So we go up there quite often and rent a cabin, and it's ridiculously cheap. And matter of fact, that's where we were last weekend. We went up there and stayed at the cabin for her 50th high school reunion.
Great. I just
okay.
I just have one other question to
Sure.
ask you, and just out of curiosity. Okay, you basically left the commission ranks and went back into I think it was a battery as a
As an E5.
As an E5 fire were you
FDC. Yes,
okay.
I was.
How were you received that way?
I didn't have any problem. I didn't perceive there was any problem with it. The only comment I got one time, and it wasn't to me, it was, I was in a group, and one of the guys said to somebody else, said, yeah, Hennessy over there used to command one of the batteries, and he resigned his commission, but he came back as an NCO. You gotta like the guts of doing that. So, yeah. I wanted to get my retirement papers, and I knew I couldn't do it if I didn't put in another, 4 or 5 years.
You needed to get the
the
requisite points. And,
yeah, well, I needed to get the good time,
right.
Good years. So that's why I did it, because by that time my daddy was retired from the military and the Internal Revenue Service. He was an Internal Revenue agent, as that was his career. he and my mother were doing quite well on those 2 retirements and a little bit of Social Security. My daddy used to say he fell into his retirement. He didn't plan it that way. It just sort of happened. Then also, after he passed away, my mother was very well, he had survivor's benefits on both his pensions.
Okay. So she's very well taken care of.
Very well taken care of until she passed away. And I was really impressed by what, that. Of course, I will note that the year I started receiving benefits in January 2009 was the first year that in 26 years they did not have a COLA. Same thing in 2010. So for the, I got the same amount for 2 or 3 years with no COLAs.
Yeah.
And I think we got 1.5% last year. So, but if I had it to do over again, I might have stayed active duty and gone back to OCS, put in my 20 in the active duty and then gotten out. But I can't complain. I got 6 head of youngin'. They're all grown and responsible adults now. They've given us 10 grandchildren, so I can't gripe.
Had a good life.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you very much for interviewing. It's you have a fascinating story, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And,